This stereotype dehumanizes Muslims because any normal person isn't essentially violent all the time or for no good reason.
Sure.
So Muslims are like any other communities and societies. They're just acting normal. So to attach a specific stigma of violence to them is just irrational.
Sure. And Doctor, so what would be your response? Would you encourage a Muslim to go overseas and go study in a university which is predominantly known to be an Oriental institution?
We have two things here. The first thing is that for that Muslim student has to have his particular strong basis in Islamic Sharia and in Islamic sciences from a traditional Azharite point of view. And then, of course, he can go and make use of the new methodologies and technologies used to study Islam in the West.
Sure.
And maybe he will make a very good contribution to that.
Right, okay.
And we're even very lucky to have people like Jonathan Brown, professor of Islam. He's a convert and has produced so many books that give a very balanced view of Islam. So basically, Islam is having people from everywhere. It's I think it's defended by God. So
sure.
He will make it. He will create soldiers for Islam where there are none.
That's a promise of Allah, isn't it? That He will make Islam the victorious religion no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Also, Doctor, we had a selection of topic of secularism. And I would like to ask a question here that we find many a scholar or Islamic thinkers now promoting secularism and wanting secularism in Muslim countries. And they're saying it's a stepping stone into the establishment of religion. Would you agree with that statement?
I don't think so. Secularism is by definition an anti-religion. It's first of all, it looks like a neutral term when it comes to religion, but secularism works by degrees. First of all, it says religion belongs to the private sphere of man. And then, side by side, it will allow for atheism to grow. It will allow for other competing ideologies to grow. And finally, religion will disappear even from the private sphere. So secularism, or let us say secularization, is a process, the end product of which is atheism.
Okay, but Doctor, one may argue with your premise here that Turkey, as an example, which used the secular system, managed to go from being very secular to becoming relatively religious.
I don't think so. It has become relatively secular.
Okay.
So basically, what happened was secularism was a little bit tempered, but not finished, or it remains the skeletal part of the political system.
Okay.
So Muslims are just, or Islamist parts are allowed a space to work with the same rules of the game, of the political game, and even in the attempted coup in Turkey, the attempted coup in Turkey in July is just an indication of how far it is safe for political parties from an Islamist background. How far is it dangerous for them? They're all the time being threatened by being toppled through a coup, even after the economic achievements and growth and liberties which Erdogan and his party have introduced.
Okay, so would you then agree with some people who might say that the ideal political model in our day and age is the model of Turkey, or would you say that's not?
Turkey is never an ideal model. So far, we don't have a Muslim nation which we call a good model for the applying of Sharia and Islam.
Okay, so we're still looking.
We're still looking, and countries are succeeding in one way or another. And there was an interesting study which placed Muslim countries at, the study was interested in seeing how far a country is bound by Sharia or is Islamic, and it turned out Ireland turned out to be number one.
The most religious
Yeah,
Islamic
so
country.
I mean, so in terms of applying the spirit of Islam and Islam,
Okay.
it is not just about appearances and having a beard or a thobe. It's about the establishment of Muslim Islamic principles.
So, Doctor,
So
maybe
we're lacking in that.
maybe we might hear some fatwa telling us that we have to make migration to Ireland.
By the way, there is an idea that the old distinction between Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb is no longer valid, because in places where we have a Dar al-Islam, Muslims are prevented from praying in certain mosques or having their having a safe way of practicing religion without being monitored, spied on, sometimes arrested and tortured. So, but if you go to a certain Dar al-Harb, for example, you might just find a real Dar al-Islam in terms of how Muslims are free to practice their religion. They can just go to the court to get their rights, things which sometimes or many times in Muslim nations are not our luxuries.
Okay, so Doctor, let me ask you a question then, coming back to the interpretation of the Sharia. We understand that some of the scholars, our great scholars, have got, they say, the maqasid of the Sharia, the purposes of the Sharia. Would you say then in certain Western countries, like you mentioned Ireland, do you think they are closer to the purpose of the Sharia than many Muslim countries?
Yeah, if protection of the nafs of the person, his property, his mind, his religion, those five essential qualities which Islam stresses and protects through hudud and through, if that's the measure by which a country is judged Muslim or less Islamic, then I think many Western countries will qualify as more Islamic than countries we deem Islamic.
Okay, very interesting. Doctor, let's move forward a little bit. Another topic that